Artoria Pendragon, better known to the world as King Arthur, goes down in legend for the creation and governance of Camelot alongside her Knights of the Round Table. With their help, she vanquishes the white dragon Vortigern and protects her people from Saxon invaders. She wields the holy sword Excalibur and its scabbard Avalon, both given to her by Vivian, the Lady of the Lake. Perhaps more important, she's entrusted the holy lance Rongominyad, also referred to as the Spear of the End. In Artoria's hands, it is capable of conjuring a light of destruction that rivals her sword, but in truth, Rongominyad serves a much greater purpose. It is the Tower of Light that anchors the world's layers, ensuring that the physical world and its reverse side remain tethered to the planet. When used as a weapon, the lance is merely an avatar of its full glory. Its might is what deals the final blow to Vortigern, yet it is not enough to spare Artoria her fate on the hills of Camlann. She perishes, unable to remain as a guardian to one of the last places on Earth to prolong the Age of Gods. Artoria's sister, Morgan Le Fay, loathes her, doing everything she can to sabotage the king's reign. Despite this, at her sister's untimely death, Morgan hopes to preserve Rongominyad and its mystery. She reluctantly acknowledges only Arthur may use it, and so she sets out to seal the lance away until the king can one day return. Artoria is, after all, prophesied as Britain's once and future king. Thus, Morgan heads to Wales, finding a village home to Logos React, one of the 7 superweapons of Atlas. It is a pseudo-spiritron computer that simulates possible realities and can recreate mental landscapes. For her own purposes, Morgan works with Atlas alchemists to create a smaller replica of this device, basing it off the personality of Sir Kay of the Round Table. Of all the knights, he was the most irreverent, as well as least likely to covet Rongominyad for himself. Without his consent, Morgan imbues the replica with his mental landscape, resulting in a mystic code named Ad that seals away the lance's power while retaining its mystery. Morgan then entrusts Ad to the villagers, who worship her as one of the Black Madonna. They carry on the dream that Arthur may one day return, believing they can resurrect her in time. The same village is paired with a cemetery, presided over by the dead apostle ancestor Gransurg Blackmore. This vampiric mage worships birds, namely crows and ravens, and out of respect for him, his descendants name this graveyard the Blackmore Cemetery. It remains a mysterious, yet significant place to mages, though that fame doesn't carry beyond the practice of magecraft. King Arthur's more common gravesite is memorialized in Glastonbury, but her actual corpse is enshrined deep in the catacombs beneath Blackmore Cemetery. The inner workings of this shrine are modeled after Avalon, the king's promised utopia, where the villagers hope to bring about her revival. For nearly 2,000 years, the villagers cling to a ritual that can resurrect Artoria. It requires the combination of 3 components: Artoria's body, mind, and soul. Using Logos React, the villagers are able to simulate Artoria's mind as an ominous being called the Corpse King. Though Artoria's physical body decays, its magical essence is preserved and imprinted onto select villagers. Her soul, however, proves evasive, and without a viable means of obtaining it, the village's attempts to resurrect King Arthur continually fail. In modern times, the Blackmore Cemetery is split into 3 different factions. One group is the cult that worships Morgan Le Fay. Under the leadership of their matriarch called Grandmother, they still aim for Arthur's revival. Separate are the Blackmore Gravekeepers, who secretly hold on to their magecraft. They do not oppose Arthur's resurrection, but they also don't cooperate with the cultists. Lastly, the Holy Church has taken root in the village, deeming the ritual to be blasphemy. Conflating Morgan Le Fay and their own Virgin Mary as different Black Madonnas, the Church uses worship to mask their intent to sabotage the cult's ritual. After countless generations, the village's plans finally bear fruit. One of the villagers, Magdalena, is a potential candidate to become Arthur's body. Grandmother, however, loses hope and deems Magdalena a failure. Rather, it is Magdalena's daughter, Grey, who becomes the vessel for King Arthur. Grey is a gentle girl raised by all 3 factions of the village. She serves as an apprentice gravekeeper under Berzak Blackmore, who confides in her skills despite her fear of ghosts. She has a heightened sensitivity to spiritual beings, and when she interacts with them, their negative emotions bleed into her. Nevertheless, she is honored to be named Berzak's successor. The village priest, Fernando Croze, teaches Grey Christian prayers. Though she isn't especially religious, she forms a habit of praying for others in distress. Grandmother and the other cultists see potential in Gray, as she seems especially compatible with the mana preserved from Artoria's corpse. They entrust Ad to her, even though it appears to be nothing more than an inanimate cube. By all means, Gray should wind up as another failed vessel, but that changes due to a certain ritual in the Far East. Fuyuki, Japan is home to the Holy Grail Wars, battles in which mages summon servants and fight to have their wishes granted. These servants come from the Throne of Heroes, where legends and souls of fallen warriors are recorded across time. During the Fourth Holy Grail War, Artoria Pendragon is summoned to fight for the Einsburn family. While the Blackmoor Cemetery isn't involved in this war, they are nonetheless affected by it. Sparked by Artoria's summoning, Gray's face begins to shift, suddenly transforming into a near-perfect replica of the king. This gives Grandmother and the cultists newfound hope, and to enact their ritual, they give Magdalena a magical dagger, Erosion, which was made by Morgan long ago as a means of separating a person's soul from their body. She is made responsible for cleaving her daughter's soul out, so that Gray's flesh can merge with Artoria's projected mind in the Corpse King. Nonetheless, the village cannot proceed without a proper way of obtaining Artoria's soul. Gray's life changes instantly when her face transforms. It is a horrifying experience, seeing her own face become unrecognizable. For the next 10 years, she is worshipped not as herself, but as the vessel for someone else. Her sense of identity is tainted, leaving her with little to cling to. She used to love making homemade fudge with her mother, but ever since her face changed, every aspect of her life is being regulated, down to the hour, in order to align her with Artoria's wavelength for the ritual. Her mother dictates all the details of her life, from her food to her clothing. Gray used to take painting lessons, but she gives up when the villagers prove uninterested in her achievements. The only things Gray can rely on seem to be her mentor Bersak and Ad, who is woken up along with her sudden transformation. Ad, inheriting Sir Kay's persona, is both snarky and abrasive, and yet he becomes her only friend when the village alienates her as an object of worship. Despite earning Grandmother's trust in following orders, Gray's mother Magdalena intends to sabotage the ritual. After all, it involves cutting into Gray's body and separating her soul so that Arthur's mind and spirit can use her hollowed flesh. To Magdalena, this means casting out her daughter's own soul, losing it forever. Thus, her cooperation with the cult is merely a ruse, an act she puts on in order to gain their trust and acquire erosion for herself. By dictating every aspect of Gray's life, Magdalena isn't merely synchronizing her daughter with the king's wavelength, she's also synchronizing Gray to her own wavelength as well. Sadly, for this to work, Magdalena cannot inform Gray of her actions, and she endures being seen as an enemy. There is limited time for her to act. By consulting with a mage from outside the village, a nefarious man named Dr. Heartless, she confirms that the cult is placing their bets on Artoria being summoned again for Fuyuki's 5th Grail War. Anticipating this, the villagers aim to intercept Artoria's soul from the Throne of Heroes and merge it with Gray's body and the Corpse King's mind. With the Grail War coming soon, Magdalena makes her move at an opportune moment. An unexpected visitor, Waver Velvet, formerly known as Lord Melloi II, comes to the Blackmoor Cemetery hoping to recruit one of their gravekeepers as a bodyguard. Waver was a survivor of the previous Grail War, and in order to stand a chance in the 5th War, he seeks help from the Blackmoors who specialize in fighting spirits. At the village, he meets Gray and is immediately afraid of her appearance. She bears the same face as Artoria, who tried to kill him during the 4th Grail War. Defensively, he asks her to cover her face beneath her hooded shawl. This would normally be extremely rude, but Gray actually finds it liberating. She too hates her face. It has robbed so much from her over the last decade. While Gray escorts Waver around the village, her mother sets in motion her plan to thwart the ritual. At night, she inflicts upon herself a fatal knife wound. Before dying, she uses the dagger Erosion to cut out her mind and soul. With a decade of synchronizing herself with her daughter, Magdalena's body attracts the Corpse King, who merges into her bleeding body, effectively taking Gray's place in the ritual. Having wounded herself, however, Magdalena places a trap, such that when the Corpse King enters her, she will die, taking the both of them down. Come morning, the villagers discover a corpse that looks just like Gray. In their confusion, Berserk pulls the real Gray aside and hands her off to Waver, telling them to never return. To this, Waver selfishly asks Gray to be his apprentice and bodyguard in London, which she accepts, asking in return for him to continue hating her face. Over the following months, Gray develops an impassioned loyalty to Waver. Unlike the people of her village, he treats her like her own person rather than a vessel for King Arthur. Life in London is a brand new experience for her, as she was never allowed to leave the village. Her only means of procuring goods from the outside came from traveling merchants. As a result, she is shy and antisocial, often hiding behind Waver unless specifically called out. She's not a mage, and yet she accompanies him to the clock tower as a student and is forced to confront both modern social interactions and obscure magecraft at the same time. She makes friends with the caretakers of her dormitory, as well as Waver's acquaintances. This includes Rhinus Melloi Archesort, the true heir to the Melloi family. She plans to inherit the title of Lord when she gets older, and is using Waver as a temporary placeholder. Gray and Rhinus indulge in pleasantries, such as sampling artisan sweets and watching movies together. While Gray is terrified of ghosts in reality, she takes no issue with fictional ones. She makes friends with Gray's best students, Flat and Sven, the latter of whom was raised to use bestial magecraft. With canine instincts, he is comforted by Gray's scent, and while he means well, his advances come on too strong, forcing Waver to put a restraining order between the two of them. Gray doesn't have many hobbies, but she does set aside time each week to watch a TV show about a dog who becomes a knight to save his princess. She sincerely enjoys this program, but denounces it publicly as a show for children. Wanting to seem mature, she takes up reading detective and adventure novels. Since Waver often investigates supernatural occurrences, Gray likens him to Sherlock Holmes, imagining herself as Watson. This is more accurate for its delusion than its romance, however, as Waver proves to be a slob. He struggles to wake up on time and lets his long hair get tangled. As such, Gray takes it upon herself to drag him out of bed, brush his hair, polish his shoes, and perform various administrative tasks for him. That said, in their short time together, Gray has many opportunities to fulfill her role as a bodyguard. In combat, she wields Ad, which, as the seal for Rongominiad, can unleash the lance's power in alternate forms. When needed, Ad can change between a scythe, shield, hammer, boomerang, halberd, bow, greatsword, and even a grappling hook. In order for Gray to properly use these armaments, Ad drains the energy of spiritual bodies and mana flows, which augment her physical performance. To an extent, Ad can conjure a portion of Rongominiad's true power, unleashing a devastating beam of light that can vanquish most foes. Its strength is determined by disabling up to 13 seals placed upon it by the Knights of the Round Table, meaning that using the lance requires approval from the Knights based on certain preset restrictions. Such criteria include fighting a stronger opponent to the death for the sake of truth and humanity. When absolutely desperate, Ad can even manifest his personality, Sir Kay, as a recreated spirit. In this form, he is a hazy figure that doesn't count as a proper servant. After working with Waver for 6 months, Gray decides to return to her village in order to understand exactly what happened the day she left. When she reaches the cemetery, she is shocked to see that it's been completely abandoned. This is the result of Magdalena's sacrifice. She killed herself, forcing the Corpse King to die alongside her. In turn, this killed the part of Logos React that was used to project the Corpse King as a simulation of Artoria's mind. Confronted by its own death, a logistical impossibility, Logos React went out of control, swallowing the villagers into one of its simulations. This, in turn, threatens the stability of all life on Earth, and so Waver and Gray enter the simulation, not only to discover the truth of their past, but to also stabilize the rampaging superweapon. Within, they learn about Magdalena's actions and the full extent of the ritual. They confront the Corpse King, who wields a dark reconstruction of Rongominiad, along with an army of skeleton warriors. To protect Gray, Ad unleashes his form as Sir Kay, who uses the noble phantasm Camelot image, in which the walls of Camelot emerge from mist and reflect incoming attacks. Because he isn't a proper servant, this noble phantasm destroys his spirit core. After a harrowing battle, erosion is used to separate Logos React from the Corpse King, stopping its expansion and bringing life back to the captive villagers. This includes Magdalena, who is able to be hospitalized before her injuries take her. Due to the Corpse King's demise, Grandmother and her cult lack the means of reviving King Arthur, so they abandon the ritual. While Grey doesn't go back to the village, she is content knowing her mother is alive and well. Perhaps one day she will find the resolve to return and thank Magdalena. For now, she continues being Waver's bodyguard, hoping to see his wish come true. During the Fourth Holy Grail War, Waver formed an unforgettable connection to Iskandar, the King of Conquerors. Grey supports Waver's desire to reunite with his former servant and accompanies him to make it a reality. Little do they know that, in another universe, they would have the chance to become heroic spirits themselves. In one possible universe, mages established the Chaldea Security Organization to protect the human order. It functions by sending masters to key points in the past to resolve singularities that threaten to alter proper human history. Tragedy strikes Chaldea when its elite masters from Team A betray humanity, opting to instead support an alien god. The only surviving master, Ritsuka Fujimaru, takes up the mantle of keeping humanity safe. They summon a great many servants of their own, including China's brilliant military tactician, Zhuge Liang. Rather than being summoned in his proper form, however, Zhuge Liang instead opts to become a pseudo-servant, using an ordinary human's body as his vessel. To pair with a brilliant thinker from the modern era, Zhuge Liang manifests in Waver's body, ultimately choosing to let Waver take control with access to his powers. Waver himself was never famous enough to leave a mark on history, but via Zhuge Liang, he is able to serve Ritsuka in the fight for humanity. Another of Chaldea's servants, Leonardo da Vinci, helped build much of the organization's facilities, including a subsystem called Mnemosine. Its job was to verify the Master's existence after ray-shifting, in the emergency event that Chaldea's staff were killed. This system was never implemented due to technical errors. However, when Chaldea establishes a new base at the Wandering Sea, Mnemosine accidentally activates and collects data on the organization's mission thus far. It learns about Chaldea's only remaining master and their betrayal from Team A. Hoping to protect Ritsuka, Mnemosine creates its own singularity based off Ritsuka's memories. The result is a patchwork London, centered around a fake Rongo-Miniad disguised as the Tower of London. Ritsuka, determined to keep fighting, would never accept being trapped in a singularity, so Mnemosine intentionally deprives Ritsuka of important memories. Despite this, Waver attempts to investigate and resolve the singularity on his own, drawing Mnemosine's wrath. When this becomes too much for him, Waver relies on Zhuge Liang's abilities to go into hiding. His noble phantasm, Chushi Biao, is an abstract ability manifesting from a letter he once wrote to the Emperor Liu Shan. Rather than an attack or a shield, this noble phantasm grants its user whatever they desperately need in a given moment. Waver invokes the noble phantasm, resulting in two major outcomes. First, he makes a dead copy of himself that he uses to investigate while not being detected as a servant. In addition, he calls out for help from those most dear to him, in this case, his adopted sister Rhines, his student Luvia, and most importantly, his bodyguard Grey. For the former two, they appear as pseudo-servants, needing an epic hero's legend to grant themselves servant form. Grey, however, is deemed strong enough on her own to manifest as an assassin servant. She comes across Waver's murder site and joins Ritsuka to discover what happened to him. This has her exploring Patchwork London, while Waver secretly investigates from the shadows. The two of them ultimately meet up when Mnemosine's misguided ploy is revealed. Ritsuka and their servants storm the fake Rongo-Miniad and confront Mnemosine in battle. Claiming victory, they resolve the singularity, which typically causes all the servants to vanish along with it. Grey, however, encounters the Singularity's Holy Grail, which resonates with her for possessing a projection of the real Rongo-Miniad. It grants her wish to be with Waver, sending her to Chaldea as one of Ritsuka's proper servants. Here, she is welcomed by Chaldea, given the chance to fight by her mentor's side for an even greater purpose.